So welcome everyone to this session on ecofeminism. I'd like to first of all say that first of all, I'm Ines and I'm a climate justice activist based in Lisbon. First of all, I'd like to warn everyone that we're going to record the interventions of the speakers, and afterwards, as soon as we start the discussion phase, we will stop recording. So it's gonna record for the first few minutes. First, I'd also like to make some notes on the agenda. We're going to start with a short 10-minute intervention by each of our speakers. Then we will open for questions and the debate, hoping to continue developing the topics that we aim to include in here. And I'd like to stress that this phase will be like for everyone to contribute. So feel free to send us messages throughout the session. And then Leonora and me, we will select them and we will make them to the speakers. But also if you prefer, and I prefer that actually, if you prefer to speak yourself, you can send us an asterisk in the chat, and then I will give you words to make the questions in the discussion phase. And you can also open your camera and all of that, and we can see you and you can speak your questions in this phase. And now in the end, we will have some time for some closing notes from our speakers. And I'd only like to add that besides the asterisk to ask for the word to speak, other facilitation signals will be the plus signal if you agree with what someone is saying, and also a question mark if you need some kind of clarification about what someone is saying. Now, for what we will be addressing, I'd like to say first that ecofeminism is a current of feminist thought that argues that, among other things, of course, that the exploitation of women and the environment have similar roots within capitalist exploitation and thus need to be addressed simultaneously. Starting from this premise, the aim of this session is to discuss a bit why the feminist climate justice and class struggles need to go hand in hand to be able to truly challenge the capitalist system that we live in. We also wish to look at the current reality and at possible solutions and plans that we can use to tackle the current social care and climate crisis by discussing a bit how an eco-feminist perspective about reproductive work, this is the kind of work needed to care for everyday life, and also about labor in general can contribute to current organizing efforts to stop climate and environmental collapse, but also how it is fundamental to imagine the kinds of eco-socialist society that we may aim to build, free from the several forms of exploitation and oppression that characterize our current system. More specifically, I would add that we also want to think a bit strategically about how this perspective, this eco-socialist perspective, can be incorporated in climate jobs campaigns and why it should definitely be incorporated in them. So to this end, I'm very happy to say that I'm joined by two amazing ecofeminists. I'm also sad to say that Faiza from South Africa, she won't be able to join us. We just received word from her that she is experiencing a lot of internet cuts. There's been rolling electricity blackouts there. And so also since she's working from quite precarious, quite precarious context and conditions, she will unfortunately not be able to join. But I'm happy to present my two ecofeminist comrades, which I already know from before and I've worked with before, and I'm very happy to be here with them. So Stefania Barca, she is a senior researcher at the Center for Social Studies in Coimbra University, where she is a co-coordinator of the research group on social policies, labor and inequalities.
I was.
Oh.
I'm in Santiago de Compostela now. Sorry, I didn't update you. I moved. I'm at the University of Santiago in Spain.
Okay. Now you're in the University of Santiago in Spain, and your research has been focusing particularly on issues of justice connected with environmental and climate change. And you've also, throughout your career, written several articles and books, namely, for example, Forces of Reproduction or Enclosing Water. And then also Joana Bergolat, who is an ecofeminist activist from Barcelona in the Spanish state. She is a member of Anticapitalistas, which is a political organization that aspires to build an internationalist revolutionary movement that profoundly transforms today's society, defending also an ecosocialist and a feminist society. So I would begin by giving the words to Stefania. Stefania, can you tell us a bit about care work and why this is so important when we're talking about and developing environmental class politics?
Yes, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to join this conversation. I see this as a conversation among people who are working alongside of similar patterns of activism along climate justice and feminist and climate jobs campaigns. So I would be very happy to, I'm very happy to, be able to talk to you, but also with you. I'm really interested in hearing what each one of you being here has been experiencing in this activism that we are all doing in one form or another. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here on a Saturday afternoon. So, so yeah, you asked me about care work. I just wanted to introduce the topic a little bit by saying what do I mean by ecofeminism? Because here we are discussing ecofeminism, but we are discussing it within a climate jobs conference. No, I mean climate justice, climate jobs as a strictly related topics, and this is really interesting because it's new, because as everybody know, the jobs versus environment discourse has been very powerful until very recently, and it still is, no, but to me it's very good news that there is a campaign. There are several campaigns talking about climate justice as a workers issues, no, as something that has to, as a working class issue. I think this is a very welcome novelty of the past few years. This hearing so much about how the climate crisis is a class issue, because it's not affecting people equally. No, it's affecting people in different ways along class lines, as well as along race and gender and other differentiations. That people are paying unequal prices to the crisis. So I think this is a very good and very welcome starting point for any discussion to get rid of some misunderstandings that have lingered upon environmentalism and ecology more broadly, politically speaking, for a very long time. And these misunderstandings and these confusions have not helped in building a strong climate coalition. So and by strong I mean a climate coalition that is based on first of all on class alliances and decolonial alliances and feminist alliances. I think these three are really needed to put together to create a strong, broad climate alliance built upon these three. All that to say, what does everything, what does ecofeminism have to do with all this? I mean, this is a question I think that we have to ask today, no? Why we are here discussing ecofeminism in this context. Because when I say ecofeminism, most of the people I talk to, they think of something having to do with rural women, mostly in the global south, and with struggles for the land and for the commons, which is a very important part of what ecofeminism is about, and also of how ecofeminism has was born, because we owe a lot to struggles of women in the global south, like for example the Chipko movement in India, no? The women tree huggers who came from rural villages and defending the forest as a source of livelihood and subsistence, and they were all women, not exclusively, but the movement was led by women, because these women were because of the sexual division of labor, so which is a universal thing, no? Because of the fact that these women were in charge of reproductive labor, so they were in charge of reproducing the life in the community, of sustaining the households, and in a rural village this meant provisioning water and fuel wood, and a lot of things, that the medicinal plants, and a lot of things that came from the forest. So this has been basically historically a very important material basis of ecofeminism, no? When we speak of ecofeminism from a material point of view, not just conceptual or theoretical, which is also there, of course. The academic ecofeminist, of which I am part of this group, we also have contributed, not theorizing, but mostly the movement has been made by women actually doing reproductive work in rural context, and fighting for the commons as the conditions of production, the conditions of reproduction, and so defending this strict connection, no? between the environment and reproduction. But from these struggles, we have learned a lot about this connection, and this is what the ecofeminism is about. So being aware of how human well-being, human wealth and health, which is not a secondary thing nowadays, it's never been, of course, are strictly related to environmental health and environmental well-being. So these two things are and this is an ecofeminist claim. Why? Because in a lot of Western thinking, and including socialist Western thinking, non-human nature, the environment, has been seen a lot as something that had to be, mastered and dominated and somehow controlled. Something that was tendentially against human well-being, and that human well-being would be much more related to technology and science and technology and industry as forms of controlling and mastering the environment. So the ecofeminist claim goes a little bit in a different direction, and this has caused a lot of misunderstandings and also quarreling between the socialist, let's say, community and the ecofeminist community. And the ecofeminists have been seen a lot as like the backward looking people. No, people wanted to go back to some pre-industrial or traditional ways of modes of production. But ecofeminism is not about that. It's about saying, look, our well-being and our material interests as working class people, in a broadly intended, people who work for a living, our interests are actually coincide, overlap a lot with the needs and interests, so to speak, of non-human nature, because our well-being cannot be separated. It's not. They are not. We are not in opposition to each other. So this is a basic message of ecofeminism, and this message comes from a particular class of workers, which are not exclusively women. These are the reproductive workers and people who are, in the sense of people who are traditionally and also currently mostly in charge with care work and reproductive work. And by care and reproductive work, we should include both caring for people in the family, for relatives, and for people in the community, or very often in rural villages, for example, or wherever public health institutions are not available, are not there. But also caring for the environment. It could be the rural environment, it could be the forest that you rely upon for provisioning. It could be the neighborhood, the urban area where you live. And a lot of ecofeminist mobilizations have been around defending clean air and clean water in working class neighborhoods in urban areas. And that's where we also find a lot of women's activism, and also related to women's position as caregivers and as the ones who are relied upon by families, communities, and societies, and the state, in many cases, as those who take care of others. Okay, so this is not a romantic or idealized vision of what women do. This is a very materially based understanding of what women do, because they don't always have a choice, no? And because society relies upon them. But as I was saying before, this is not just women who do this work. And for example, a lot of peasant communities and a lot of indigenous communities also could be seen as earth carers, no? People who take care of the earth, of the environment, of forests, of ecosystems, for similar reasons, because they know firsthand that their own well-being depends upon the health and well-being of these environments, of these ecosystems. They have this clear, and in a lot of us, from our background as white people in urban industrial areas, we have lost that sense, because we have been misled to think that our well-being doesn't come from there. It doesn't come from, it comes from industry, it comes from technologies, which of course nobody's denying, right? But the point is to be able to, and here I come to the conclusion, I think I've already taken more than my time. The point in eco-socialism, feminist eco-socialism, is to understand how these forces can ally to each other. the forces of the what once were called the forces of production, the productive forces. So industrial labor, basically, no? How can this be seen as one sector of the revolutionary force, no? Only one component that needs alliance with the forces of reproduction, with all the people who work to reproduce human beings and reproduce also non-human nature in many ways, no? So this is what I see, this is my vision, an alliance between these two kinds of potential revolutionary forces that, if really allied with each other, could really have a potential to change the system. Now, the problem is this alliance it's still a bit wanted, I would say. And I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Stefania. It was great to hear a bit also about the different sides of ecofeminism in this context. It was very important, and also these alliances that you propose are essential, and I hope we can discuss them further when we go to our debate part. Now I would give the word to Joana. Can you tell us also about a little bit about these approaches, and also about the ideas that anti-capitalistas want to bring to ecofeminism, and how they link it to the question of labor?
I will try. I'm a bit nervous. I'm always nervous because I have to speak in English. That is not my first language and not my second language. And it's kind of a tricky moment for me to start doing like a conversation in this position, but I will try to do my best, and also to bring some ideas, because I think that there are parts that Stefania has said already that I would like to say, but well, I will try, and I have an outline. Maybe you see me that I'm reading, it's not a problem, and I hope it's not a problem, and all that kind of stuff. So, well, first of all, I would like to start to saying which is our approach to ecofeminism, because we know that there's a diversity of currents of thought, theoretical analysis, political proposal, and social movements that shape the concept of ecofeminism. But this doesn't mean that everyone thinks the same when we are talking about ecofeminism. So when we are trying to create a notion around the ecofeminism that is based on Marxist and anti-capitalistic points of view. In this way, we talk about that ecofeminism is a framework of understanding and doing political action that explains the historical, material, and ideological connections between the process of domination, exploitation, and appropriation that happen over women's bodies and nature. I say women's bodies, but I would say all the bodies that are feminized and are understood as they can be appropriated by the system, and those that are seen as the subaltern people, yeah. And in this explanation, propose an emancipatory proposal and a rupture proposal with the system that is capitalistic, genocidal, colonial, and cis-heteropatriarchal. And in this way, we think that ecofeminism is useful and strategical and important political tool that makes broader our perspective on the ecological crisis and our eco-socialist proposal, linking with the theories of social reproduction, especially in a context which the production of life increasingly generates more and more conflicts in the face of the imperatives of capital production. So in this big sentence, it's saying the idea that each time capital is in a crisis, in their action of trying to relaunch their benefit taxes, the profits that they need to do, they exploit and generate more precariousness on all the processes that are needed to stay in life. and it became more violent and more and generates more expectations in our daily life. So talking about ecofeminism, for us, it's a key element when we are talking about labor. In understanding labor in a broader sense, that this means that we need to be talking about finitude, limits, vulnerabilities, bodies, resources, commons, ecosystems, in which lands are doing some economic activities and in which lands are not doing it, about colonial processes, about interdependence, eco-dependence, needs, sufficiency, and I think it's an important thing to say, time politics. There's a lot of current work times that in our daily lives happen. We just not go to our paid jobs, we have our unpaid jobs, and in these unpaid jobs, there are a lot more than just caring for some people at your home or trying to have a clean house. There are a lot of work that is being done, that is invisible, and it's not named. And when we try to name it, it becomes political and it becomes an issue we must address. In that way, if we are talking about work, it's even more complicated when we are talking about in each sphere of work, putting on the center care. This element is also important because right now we live in a world where it's more profitable for business to be chronicle on crisis than to heal, to cut down. It's more profitable to cut down trees than to reforest. It's more profitable to have to offer to the 90% of people precarious jobs than decent working conditions. It's also more profitable for the system to cultivate with agrotoxics than to support local agroecological projects. It's also more profitable to appropriate the woman's lifetimes than to socially assume the responsibility of reproductive and care work. And also, in these conditions, claiming to a change of paradigm, it's kind of a difficult issue, because sometimes you will feel like a naive or an utopical person, but it's not just that. It's a powerful idea to be disputed in a world that is changing continuously, and where in a context that multiple crises are defining and redefining constantly what it's the work meaning in our society. So if we take an ecofeminist political economy approach, we could make the proposal from this point of view, that it could be to work less, to work all, to produce what is necessary, and to redistribute it all. In that sense, we will be talking about the idea that maybe there's a uneven timetable for works, that women or feminized bodies are taking more than we should take, on the sense that we are, if there are limits, also there are limits in our bodies, there are limits in our daily time, and we cannot take everything, and it's not for granted that we should do some work. We should socially redistribute it. In this sense, if we reduce the work that some are doing more and some are doing less, it will be interesting. The idea of reducing our working day to 6 hours, it's interesting, or to 32 hours. It's a kind of a measure that we should be talking if we are talking about climate jobs and ecofeminist climate jobs. Also talking about the idea of redistribution, the reproductive work as a whole, and in this way making visible and making, I don't know if putting salaries, but the idea of being known and shared. Maybe I'm putting some value, not necessarily money, but on the reproductive work. It will be interesting. Also, in that sense, creating public systems of care work should be an interesting idea to investigate and to generate in our spaces. Also, the idea of creating and recovering the commons and the natural goods that right now are privatized or are being put it on the market of futures and being spaces of generating new accumulation processes and speculation processes. Also, the idea of challenging the paradigm of infinitive growth and placing the embodied and biophysical limitation of our bodies and territories, it will be a prerequisite for any economical activity we want to place on the future. And in terms of the role that feminism and ecofeminism can do in this point of view is overcoming the reductionist view on work and trying to guarantee the sustainability of life with the ideas of decommodifying the resolution of our social needs, and in this way to de-liberalize the access of rights, challenging all the exterior policies that create people from I'm having issues with the language right now, that create people that are seen as good people are and less scared people. I don't know how to say it. I'm making myself a mess. Well, trying to hierarchize between people from each countries, trying to put your rights in a scale of which color of your skin is. It will be an important thing that we must abolish, and we must work on the perspective of creating an ecofeminism or a climate jobs that sustain our new kind of life and our kind this I don't know, socialist society that we want to go to. And also the idea of prioritizing non-market ways to accessing material, social, and cultural resources that are necessary for developing a dignified life in our societies. So yeah, that will be some ideas. Maybe I can say more after. I'm getting a lot of being a lot of nervous. So yeah, I will stop talking, and I hope then in the question part I will do it better.
You did perfectly okay, Joana. And it's perfectly normal that you feel a bit nervous and that you feel a bit uneasy about speaking in another language that is not your original one, but you did great. And thank you so much for bringing this socialist ecofeminist perspective. That's also Stefania was also starting to address, and also developing so much on some proposals that could be useful to take into consideration when we are talking about climate jobs campaigns